My name is Caleb Daniels. I work with DieselGreen Fuels. This is Jason Burrows, the owner of DieselGreen Fuels, and the guy with the idea behind Biodiesel Control Center. So this software, I think, was really born out of necessity. I started at Piedmont Biofuels, and about the time I came in as an intern, it's the same time frame when the oil collection business really started at Piedmont with Greg Ostick. And it was really helpful for me to see it from the ground up there. He was making calls to all these other guys, figuring out how to put it together, and just kind of living in an Excel world for a long time. And we would constantly have all these ideas. What if, we had a program that could do this, it could tell us that, some kind of historical data. And we talked to one company when I was at Piedmont, but it just wasn't really the right package. And working with DieselGreen in the past few years, this has been a really great tool to help us run the business. And it's kind of the go-to thing to manage employees and to record all your data and look up historical data, manage leads for new accounts, and basically just run the business overall. It's all cloud-based. So let's see. It started development in 2008 with an intern turned employee, Chris Continenza, who worked with DieselGreen. He started writing the code and just kind of fulfilling these ideas one by one. So it's kind of a growing organic thing since that time. Chris is no longer working on the software, but there's a developer that continues to work with it. So once every quarter, once a year, or little bug fixes here and there will get done to the software. As Jason was mentioning, there are specific customers that have specific needs. For instance, we have a client in Canada that obviously doesn't care about gallons, or someone else who's paying or wants moisture content included, or things like that. So there's slight variations on the software as well. And this will just be our we'll do a live demo of DieselGreen's version of the software.
By the way, it's called Biodiesel Control Center because originally it was going to be part of a whole package where we could record the batches that went out and then record the batches of biodiesel that came in and then RINs associated with those and things like that. And the name just stuck. So there really is nothing in it related to biodiesel. It's just grease management, route management, work order software.
Yep. So this is the front page, I guess you could say. Just gives you a little readout. Number of customers currently. We upload locations. You can upload kind of each one of these potential customers as a CSV file, and even the ones that we don't have, we can enter information. We know that this place has a Griffin contract for the next 2.5 years, or it comes up on this date, or we used to have these guys, or just anything you want to include about a customer that you may potentially want in the future. You can still track records on people you don't currently serve. For any reminders you've created for yourself, they'll show up here. It's a function of the software. And then the work order system, which I think is where we'll start, is in tasks.
And feel free to interrupt with questions along the way. It's hard to hold questions for software things. We'll just answer along the way.
Yep. So this is the task section. So this is essentially this is what we use. Let's say I'm on the phone, a restaurant calls in and their bin is full early, or their bin is knocked over, or something like that. I'll go in here, create a new work item, kind of do a demo of one here, and I could just set this up for someone to do. Task would be clean up a spill or something like that. Whoops. So then you can you choose, if it has to be done immediately, you can say today, and you can set the priority level. So we work with 1 being the highest priority. And then you'd have a drop down of your employees, and so you could assign this to someone. You can say work when. Maybe if you can only get in the parking lot at night, you can say you have to go after business hours or something like that. There's a special case. And then all of your customers are going to be in the drop-down menu. Of course, you can hit, starts with a D, you can hit D and just scroll down and pick out wherever it is. And then comments, you can describe the whole situation, you can put the phone number of a contact there, whatever you need to do. And then if you save that, And then when that person logs into Biodiesel Control Center, they'll see that work item. Mike, our driver, likes to print his out every time he gets them, just so he has all that info there, doesn't have to go back on his phone or whatever. And there's actually a place where it tells you whether or not it's been printed out. So he'll print these out and go do the work order. I remember the first time I saw this software was at CBC in '09 in DC. There's a little group called Kaleva out there. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them. But they do adventure racing as well as biodiesel. They took us out on a couple little sailboats that they had. And Jason got a call on his phone from a restaurant and got on his iPhone and assigned the work order right there on the water to Mike and said, oh, he's going to take care of it. What are you talking about? What is this? So that was kind of the first introduction I got to it. But it's very simple. Even if you're in the field, you can make one of these work orders, assign it to an employee, and they'll get it taken care of. And when they go in,
Can you push it directly to their phone, so it pops right up on their?
No, it's not that kind of software. I mean, this is web-based software. It doesn't tie in anybody's phone. It's just a web browser.
Okay.
So they would have to log in to see a work order.
Okay.
If there's an urgent work order, that's still just back to text messaging and things like that.
yeah.
That is something we've thought about, like reminders that would email you at a certain time.
Right.
We just felt like we didn't want too much scope creep where it try to manage everything, and we just haven't done those kind of things.
Okay.
What I'll do is, if it's an urgent situation, I'll go in, write up the work order with all the detail, and then I'll text Mike, hey, I just got a call, check your task, there's an important job. He'll go in, he'll be able to see all the details instead of having to type all that out on the phone or whatever. So where's the one I just cleaned up still? So, and you can go back and edit it. If you get a different phone number, somebody else calls, or the situation changes, you can go back in there and change it slightly. And then when you close the work order, Mike would go in here and say, I signed off on this, type in his name and the date, and then he'd write up, I went out, talked to Joanne, she said everything is cool, or they hate us now and you probably need to follow up and talk to them so we can maintain this account. So there's just closing comments here, and I said I don't really want to save it. But you can go back and look at all those closed work items. So if you have a customer, let's see, choose your...
Just start with click get work order. Yeah. There's some, you might have hundreds or thousands, so we chose not to list them all to start with.
Yeah, you just choose the time frame here, and then, if something comes up at that same restaurant again in the future, you can go back to your work orders, search it, find out what happened, who talked to who, what the outcome was. So it's really good for historical data and knowing what you've done and who did it when. It's really good for tracking that kind of stuff. So, the other things on here are, you can do phone logs, so there's a section for phone calls. Somebody's answering your phones, they can enter the phone calls here. Won't spend too much time on that.
I'll tell you, when we first started using this, we had somebody in our office, it was my mom, and if you go to answered calls, the next little link over there, you can see how many times we used it, and that's just in that first 6 months or so. We logged every call, every person, and it was fantastic. Eventually, she started being mobile, and she was on her cell phone, and we just stopped using it. But I'm a believer that having a call log, when you go back and look at things and say, who called in and why? Oh, here it is. Who did they talk to?
Someone will have to type in the conversation.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So then there's also a section here for reminders. You can create a reminder for yourself at any time in the system. Even if it's something general that's outside of any specific customer, you can say, remember to clean out your desk or whatever. Or you can create reminders that are specific to a certain customer. You can do that from here. You can also do it from the customer page, and that'll be pretty helpful. Like Alamo Draft House is a great movie theater in Austin. They tore down one of their theaters to build it up bigger and better. And there's a certain date where I'm going to get back in touch with them and say, all right, are you guys ready for your container again, or what's your timeline now? Construction and things change. Just to remind you, because this is like a 6 month later down the line from when I wrote it. So there's things like that that are pretty helpful. Just make sure you stay on top, especially those important customers. All right. Next section I'm going to go to is sources. This is essentially where you can search for all of your current customers or anyone who's in the system. You can choose how to do that. You can choose to just search customers.
Well, let me point out something here, if you don't mind, Caleb. So one of the challenges we had early on was how do you deal with thousands and thousands of restaurants? We first built it, we just had this list. We found the page would take minutes to load every time. The more we added, the slower it would be. So we started with like kind of a Google instant search using the Google Search API. And so what it does is the moment you start typing a character, you'll see a little circular moving thing. It's already looking for everything that has the letter T in it. So as you type, it refines the list of what's there. So this list is every lead or customer in your entire database, which is about 9,000. The thing you pointed out wasn't quite correct, Caleb. The thing at the bottom will allow you to select the check boxes next to all the ones in the results that are customers. Up above that, you see how it says current customers? That's just a nice simple list of your customers. You didn't have to search to get it, it's just there. You can sort it by the different columns and things like that. This is a good one because if you click on data acquired, that column header, you can do it twice, and that way it'll go in reverse. This is a quick way to see, what did we get? Okay, it looks like we got one today. Yeah, they called in. We got 3 yesterday. We got 1 a few days before that. This is just a real quick, simple way to see your current customers.
In that current customers, let's say you have a customer that has multiple locations. Does each location show up as one spot, or can you click on that customer and then get to their?
There's no hierarchy like that. Each location is an individual restaurant.
This is a chain that we work with.
Yeah, here's a good example, Torchy's Tacos.
I can scroll down.
So each individual one is listed as a customer.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. We do have the ability to set like a mailing address that's tied to another location. We've talked about like having a parent company and stuff like that. We just haven't done it.
Yeah, because we've tried a routing software once before, and now we're trying another one. I didn't know about you guys, so we haven't learned about it right now. But one of the problems has been that when we go to update a customer with multiple locations, is then you got to remember to update every single location. Let's say they change their phone number or something, and you have one phone number to call the owner, but you have to go into every location and change it. That's just been part of the feedback I've gotten from our routing person.
Because we haven't dealt with many chains, we don't have very many locations ourselves that have one contact for multiple locations.
Yeah.
But that's good feedback. It's something we can.
Like for all these Torchies, we have a GM at each restaurant that's our contact, and then we also have higher up in the company contacts
Okay.
separately. Let's see. So we'll just go ahead and look at one of these customer pages here. This is one of the new locations that's just opened, one of the Torchy spots. So pretty straightforward. Name, address, things like that. You've got a main phone number to the restaurant, or you can put in a website if you want. Your contact at that location. You can get a phone and email. And you can show if it has a mailing address. It also links up with Google Maps. If you just want to see where it is, if you aren't familiar with that area, you can click on Show Google Maps. It'll show a small, it does it right on the screen.
And the reason it doesn't show it there all the time is you hardly ever use it, and it takes extra time for that page to load. So.
All right. So then you have status. This is a customer. If we would choose canceled if it was a customer at one point and then they went with another company or something like that, we click the canceled box. The ignored is something we retain for restaurants that end up in our system that aren't applicable, ice cream shop or something like that. The general notes, these are things that you can write. Maybe we write our container number here, or different information as it's going on. Just in this, the difference here is that this will show up just on the screen, but the pickup notes, what you write in this box will actually print out on the route sheet when you print your route sheet for the route that encompasses this location. So if maybe they have a gate with a lock, you could write gate code is 1234, or you have to drive around back and whatever. So you can enter notes for that there. Container type, we have a drop-down menu, and of course this changes, and every company has different types of containers, so we can we can add these pretty easily as far as what type of container we use. You can put that there. There's also sections here for quality, for testing quality at various locations, and the date. And then acquisition, so contract, who got it and when, what's the length of the contract, and what date, and did it get a commission? So, and then it has a current route section right here. So when I go in and start up when I enter a new customer, it's not going to be on a route yet, and the system will actually go through, and based on that address, it'll suggest one or more routes that would potentially be a good match. You can kind of decide which one. If one route's longer already, you may put it on the other one. But it'll go ahead and give you that recommendation. And then below there we have statistics. There's a small graph there. Tell you how many times you've picked up and things like that. And if you click on pickup history, this is really helpful. This one's not very long because it's a new restaurant. But it'll show you every time you've been out there, right, whether it's on a route or on a manual. This restaurant started up, and we thought it would be a similar volume to every other Torchy's like it, but we actually had to change out their container more than once because they were just doing 3 times the volume of some of the other ones. So we entered those as manual pickups. The same thing would happen if a restaurant called in and they said our container was full. We call that, in this system, it's called a manual pickup. So you enter it there. If it's just pickup on the normal schedule, it'll show up as the route. And then any notes that need to be made. Of course, the date. So these are good to go back and get history, and you can also pull the totals for any restaurant and tell them what they've done to date, things like that.
And so how often is the gallons updated for each run that's done, and how's that inputted, or who's doing that?
Yep. So we'll get to that down the line, but in brief, when a driver gets ready to run a route, they're going to print out the route sheet. And as they go down, they're going to write their comments and gallons and things like that on their clipboard as they go. So when they get back to the office, they're going to type all that stuff in. So they enter the whole route at once. And then the program separates it into each individual spot. You can also view it as the whole route either way.
We did look at, I mean, you can, like, let's say on an iPad or a computer, you can see the whole route screen pretty easily, and you can enter it in that way. Problem is, if it takes you 4 or 8 hours to run a route, you've got this static HTML page. You might get all the way to the end and say submit. 8 hours later it says the page timed out. So we didn't want to do it that way. We could have also built it so that you enter, in the iPad or whatever, 10 gallons from this restaurant, submit. And we just felt that was too cumbersome. When drivers also don't want to get grease on the computer or an iPad, so they've got their gloves on. It's just real simple on a piece of paper to just scratch that in. The other thing is we found that regulators really appreciate paper records. So in the event of some system failure, or if you're being sued, or if you have like a real problem, the fact that you have like sort of dirty pages with handwritten notes on it, it can be very powerful to say, this is really what happened, this wasn't forged. So we keep all of our route sheets forever, or at least to date, we've got all of them, at least as far as I'm aware.
If anybody wants to see an example of a written log,
Oh, you know.
So then any work items that you've entered as a task that are pertinent to this specific location will show up here that have happened in the past. And then events. So if somebody calls in, or if you go in and talk to a manager, or if there's some kind of problem, you can write it up right here in the events section, date it, and it's going to stay there on this tab. So again, it's good for historical notes. And then once you make any kind of changes on this page, you can do 5 different things, but then at the end you would go down here and hit save location to save all those changes. Okay. So I guess the next thing we're going to look at is lead management, just real briefly. So this is this portion of the software that your sales staff would use. We subscribe to a service that tells us what new restaurants have registered with the health department each week. And so we get a list of all these new restaurants in the areas that we pay for. And we're able to take those files and upload them in. And then we assign those to sales staff. So they'll call those folks and say, hey, we saw you guys are opening up pretty soon. Do you have anybody for oil collection? Something like that. And they can even, they can continue to follow up. Maybe they call the first time and they don't get somebody and they leave a message. You can go in and make that note, or create a reminder to call that person back. Or if you went in and visited, they said, come back on Tuesday at 5. You can write that note in there. and that person will remember to do it at that time. I'll spend too much time in this section.
Show them that upload food service please real quick. So this service that we pay for, this isn't like a part of the offering that we have, but if you wanted to subscribe to the service, you could just upload it here. And what happens is, it's an Excel spreadsheet with a certain format, with certain columns and everything. So this is built to handle that format with that column structure. So you might have all of your own restaurants in an Excel spreadsheet, and if you reformatted it to match our format, then you could upload your own into the system. It's not just for this, restaurant lead list. And that's how we did it. We did some testing with customers and new customers and things like that. We just take whatever file they have and tweak it and then play around with it a little bit and then upload it. Save a ton of time to get started if you already have a bunch of accounts.
What's that service cost to get that list?
It's about $29 a month per market, and then they give you a slight discount if you have more than one market. So we pay $139 per quarter, and that gives us Austin and San Antonio. So we're just about to subscribe to Dallas as well, because we're kind of expanding there.
And you could set somebody up with that same company?
Yeah, if you have to. In fact, one of the things we've considered is having those leads populated in as part of the service, and paying extra or whatever. The problem is that restaurant lead list company uses such an ancient database system that exports to a CSV format from like literally 10 years ago, and it has some corruption in it that they won't even acknowledge is there. And so there's all these tools out there that will convert CSV to PHP programmatically in the back end, and none of them work with their lead list. So we're kind of, our hands are tied on that, but at some point in the future, maybe eventually they'll have to throw away that old Windows 3.1 computer and get something that works, and then maybe we'll be able to do that.
Does it work? Does using that food service list, is that working as leads?
We get about, I'd say, an average of one new account on the lead list every week or 2 weeks. So, it's totally worth the money. There's definitely a level of frustration because a lot of them, they don't even have a phone number. A lot of them, they don't have, they always have an address, but it's a phone number that's usually listed. So then we go to Google and say, oh yeah, that new restaurant, here it is, and then find an article about them, or it's a chef from this place, and we really have to do some detective work. But sometimes the phone number that's in the lead list is the name of the person who went to the health department and got the license, so it's not really valid. There's a lot of reasons why the lead list isn't awesome, but it's good enough. If there was any other service, I'd be happy to try it out, but it's paid off for us for sure.
Who provides that service?
It's called Food Service Lead. If you just Google for Food Service Lead, you'll find it. And or remind me of the same email.
We have to do 80% of our accounts. We also have to do the grease traps.
Well,
Would this also control that as well?
not really, no. I mean, it could in a certain way. There's two things I'll say. First of all, you can certainly coordinate the routing of it, and when you picked it up, and everything but the amount of gallons collected. Now, there might be a way if we really looked at it and said, if you take a second route, and then you put the gallons there, there might be a way to track it. Like if you made, I don't know, I have to really think about it.
Yeah.
But the other alternative is the developer that we have on just, a retainer or whatever. If you had a custom project, if you liked the software enough and you wanted to add grease trap service to it, we could get a scope of work from him and get an estimate for what they would charge to do it. We've considered getting into the trap grease business ourselves too. So, it could be useful for other people. There could be some cost sharing possible.
The other thing you can do with the current model is say, create Taco Bell yellow, Taco Bell brown, and have two separate accounts for the same restaurant. One is yellow grease and one's brown grease, and they create the routes accordingly.
Right.
That's what. How do people measure the amount of gallons coming out of a particular restaurant?
It's an estimate. I mean, it's simply,
It's on the driver.
yeah,
What's the driver?
it's totally an estimate, and I don't know of any way around that. It's just the best we can do.
A stick, 55-gallon drums.
Anybody who tells you different is
25 gallons
lying.
per inch.
Yeah, really. Yeah, with the,
You gotta grease the
gallon margin
stick.
of error eyeball.
20 at a time, but
There is one system called Sea Level Annihilator, and it's an ultrasonic level gauge that you can put on your truck, and it'll tell you a gallon. It'll give you a gallon. I don't know how accurate it is, but
in your truck.
On your truck, yeah, a collector who picks up our schmutz, they have them on their truck, so they're actually billing us, they're writing us a ticket based on the meter on their truck. And they use it to a device called Sea Level Annihilator.
I'm all over that.
It's ultrasonic, yeah. It's pretty neat. We've been thinking about putting them on our trucks so that we can more accurately determine how many gallons. But again, it's, you know, you get a truck that's parked on an incline, it's gonna throw off the measurement, so.
There's also a company called Smart Bin, and they came out to talk to us, and it's pretty expensive, and, you know, we're just exploring it, probably not likely to do it.
Yeah,
Like a
this,
UK company?
Yes, UK
They called me
company.
like a couple
Yeah.
weeks ago.
So they put
They're on it.
yeah, they put a GPS sensor on there and some kind of sensor that goes inside. They haven't been super clear.
Break like that into 4 or 5 different zones.
Yeah, you could do Manhattan South, and then, hey, why don't you click on edit, and then you can see where you can, go ahead.
Does this system tell you when a route is gonna be full or how much? So
It
It tells you
every
when
8
it's
weeks.
due to run.
It does tell you when it's due.
when it's due to run?
When it's due.
Is it doing any sort of tracking on the history of the route and it will give you advice on how often to run that route or anything?
We run them every 8 weeks.
You run them?
We adjust other things. Like, in this world, there's just so many variables. And so we eliminate some variables. This is one we eliminate. This route is run every 8 weeks. If we look at the route and we look at the history and say, you know, these 5 are never more than half full. Well, the container's too big. Or potentially you could put it on every 16-week route. You know, we could create a whole nother route to address that. But we wanted to eliminate that variable because the people that we've talked to that spend hours like looking at all their collection and say, what should I go to today? And, you know, spend a couple of hours in the morning trying to decide what to go collect that day. And for us, it's already, you know, it's already there. And if we need to move them to a different route, and in our case, so we have these 8-week routes, then we put a special 3-week route for the really high producers. And they happen to all be generally in the same area, so that's not really been a problem for us. But we can create another route for, you know, different cycle.
So is that frequency is maximizing the containers? Is that how it's set up?
Yes, and the containers maximize by frequency. So, you know, if G&M Catering has only 40 gallons every time, and we have 2 drums, eventually we'll run that other containers. So we, you know, that goes back to what I was saying before. We could create another route that's even longer if we saw a whole bunch more full. If we don't have any smaller containers, then the smallest one.
So this is the editing area. If you want to change them around, it's really easy. You just click on reorder and you can drag it to any spot.
And I'll proactively here answer a question that I'm sure is on somebody's mind. Does this tell me which restaurant I should go to first? There's like this well-known, I think they call it the traveling salesman dilemma. How does somebody know which site to go to when you're running a route? Unfortunately, computers can't really accurately model that because there's so many human decisions that are made based on, you know, it's easier to make a left turn out of this one because the cars are always backed up from the light there. There's so many things that happen like that. We spent a lot of time first trying to make that work. And ultimately, we found the drivers run the route a couple of times and then they reorder.
The driver knows best. I can sit here all day and I have some, in the past, like trying to figure out how to maximize the efficiency for this route. Even after all that, he goes out and he says, you can't get to this side, you have to go all the way around. So why don't we, you know, switch around? So eventually I just said, you know, Mike, you're doing a better job than I am. Like, you know, because you're out there every time.
And it might be different if it was somebody on foot, but when you're talking about a commercial truck and its size and all the, you know, limitations of turning and stuff like that, that's the way we've chosen to do it.
Would it be beneficial to learn the routes from your driver? So that way, say your driver's gone, somebody else takes over, you've already got all that data that shows he ran this route, maybe over the course of running that route 10 times, he comes up with the most efficient way to do it.
Well, this is, like, see how it's 1 through whatever?
It's always
So he
going to
can go- he
be
basically
into the
goes
most
through-
recent order.
Yeah, sometimes he'll look at it and say, you know, I never do it this way, and then he'll go back and adjust it. It just gets adjusted, not in real time, but when we recommend that when they're entering in their route sheet data, that they go and make any changes to the routes that they've determined, or go into make notes and pick up notes if they find now there's a lock, they'll go in and do all that stuff.
I was thinking of using like hiking apps.
Dark.
Hiking apps.
I did an app called Runtastic driving here from Michigan. So it tracked my speed, the time, when I stopped. It has a GPS of my map. So you guys can go on my Facebook and it actually shows it. So I was just thinking while you guys were talking, and he said it, and I was just like, wow, that's great genius. So
It's called Runtastic.
yeah, it's for mountain biking. I mean, and you can do it running and stuff. So I tapped it into my car, and I mean, it was showing my whole thing. And you can actually live monitor where your driver is using this. So I don't think it's designed for Greece, but I think it's perfect
You
actually.
can start having, if you got more than one driver, whoever could do the route fastest, not break a law or something.
You could, yeah, it keeps it timed. It does it all. Yeah, that's sweet. They will track the time. You can fire him if he's going 80 around town.
Well, interestingly, this vacuum truck has to have a GPS in it to meet the criteria of our grant. I don't know if it's an interface that we have access to. If it is, that'd be cool, but if not, I'll certainly.
This is like a paper route. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's cool.
Runtastic.
Runtastic.
We use a software called OneBridge that is GPS tracking on our trucks, and it's been very helpful for going over state lines. I don't know if anybody in here goes over state lines, but you have to do IFTA reportings.
Right.
Reporting your mileage in other states, and you have to pay taxes on that. So this program is great because it tracks how many. You can just do a quick report. How many miles did this truck drive in South Carolina or whatever. I don't know if there'd be a way to incorporate it, but
How much is that? I've usually seen those packages pretty expensive.
I can't.
Larger truck.
It's been it's probably been a year here since we started. I can't remember what we paid for it.
All right, so you got a couple other options when you look at each route. The print option, it looks a little bit different, and it makes it's essentially printer friendly. It doesn't have a bunch of extra crap on the page. It's very straightforward. They're all in the order that the driver has set. All those notes from the page will show up on here, and then this box on the end is for writing down how much oil was in the container.
We're also talking about adding a few fields to this, like what was your starting mileage and your starting time, and then ending mileage, and starting and ending mileage, just to capture that data. Something that works.
So they would go here to print when they're getting ready to run the route, and then once they come back from the route, you can click on Enter Collection, and then they would just go, they're in the same order as on their sheet. They go down if there's any notes, and they put if there's any gallons of oil. So if something has happened that's kind of urgent or needs addressing, say some other company's light is outside that wasn't there last time, click the box that says needs follow-up, and that's going to let one of us know to go in and address that issue.
We can show you that in a minute, how it shows you, how it's reported.
You can also, from this screen, click on Enter Manual Pickups, and this is maybe for anyone who's called in, or maybe even someone who's kind of a one-off deal. They called and said, hey, I do SVO, and I got 200 gallons of extra grease in my garage. You can go in here and enter it just so that oil is in your system. And for those, we actually just usually enter them as our own name. Click and put it as DieselGreen. Let's go back.
Go to reports and show them that needs follow-up thing.
Okay.
I don't know if you really use that. I do. 3 down, need follow-up. So this is every pickup that has ever had that checkbox checked. And why don't you pick one? Yeah, just do the first one since it's 4 years old and nobody ever followed up. Click on the resolve button. Or the link. So you can say, if like you're the manager and you're saying, okay, I'm following up on this. Let's just resolve this pickup. You say, okay. And then it asks you, what happened. Now, so see how it says no other container present? I don't really know what that means, but we'll just assume it means our container's missing. So then you can say, went out, dropped another container off, and then just say cancel on that one. Once you do that, you see how it's already gone from the screen, and then if you go to that customer, there's a new sales event populated with that information. So it does 2 things. It lets a manager know, or somebody to follow up. It lets you follow up, put the information in there, and resolve it so that it's not in the system anymore.
Okay. You want to go through any of the other reports right here, or just go back to the view of collections?
I could just move on to reporting because we're kind of running short on time.
Well, I just want to wrap up this one part. So for Route 1, we can view collections, so we can view any time that route's been run, and we can look and see if the totals are off, or if it was smaller, or whatever it was specific to that day. as a whole. As
Show me
opposed
the calendar.
Yeah, as opposed to going to one restaurant and looking at all the data there. The calendar will show you days that you, manual pickups that you've already done. It'll also show you what dates you're supposed to run each route. And so this is something for the drivers to help them know what their schedule is going to look like.
Yeah, it seems, I mean, so your driver, you know, so that manual pickup on Thai Passion is gonna take him an hour. You got your other days or whatever that will be, you know, much more fuller days. How do you work with your employees as far as like, okay, you've got 3 runs this week.
Yeah. This is how we,
Manual pickup, hey, someone just called yesterday, we gotta get this done tomorrow.
yeah, that would be, it would be a task and then it would show up as a manual pickup after they enter the information. The way we do it is to enter all the routes that are going to come up for that week. We do it by week, and so they'll all show up on Monday. And so it's more like a driver could come in here and say, all right, I've got 3 routes this week, and I'm probably going to have to go take oil one of those days. So they kind of plan. I give Mike a lot of room to do it on his own schedule. Some people may want to manage more specifically, but you know, Route 9, our biggest producers, is probably going to want to do that one first. Needs to go drop oil, does that. Maybe that's his Tuesday. Does, you know, Route 2 on Wednesday. Maybe even takes Thursday off or something and does Route 6 on Friday. So it's however he wants to do it. So that's the way we kind of schedule ours.
You know, our driver is not a full-time employee either, so this is, you know, it fits his schedule.
He's an
We
hourly.
don't have enough for 40 hours of drive a week.
Okay, but then there's also, how do you know that, so if you, I mean, your 8-week period that you have for a route, that means that a restaurant's gonna get to. I don't know, for me, I know that I can't go more than, you know, 10 days, and then I'm gonna start having a problem. Like,
You mean they're gonna be full?
yeah,
Well, we sized our routes based on the amount of capacity in the container.
but you gave yourself some leeway.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. So a customer calls in and says, we want new service. We say, okay, we walk through different things, and one of the questions is, so what do you guys do exactly? Well, we're a burger and fries place. Okay, so you probably fry a lot. How many fryers do you have? We have 3 fryers. Okay, they're just like the normal fryers? Oh no, they're the big double fryers. Okay, so now I know I've got probably 12 gallons of oil, roughly. How often do you change it? Twice a week. Okay, so 12 to 24, 25 gallons a week times 8 weeks is 200 gallons. So I need to give them a container larger than 200 gallons to make sure that they're going to make it through 8 weeks. Now, occasionally they'll say, you know, we do all that math and say, wow, okay, that's like 100 gallons a week. So that would be 800 gallons every 8 weeks. We're putting you on a 3-week cycle and giving you a 300 container. We're going to watch it the first couple times to see if you get full. And if it is, we'll probably put you on a special 2-week cycle. So we try not to tell the customers so much that they can get lost in like, oh, I hope they do this right. That sounds complicated. But we just want to get the amount to them and then say, okay, all right, we'll put you on, you know, put you on the route and we'll get it started. So asking those questions up front, we have not done that plenty of times and learned from that it's a mistake not to ask those questions because it happens often enough that people get frustrated and they say, you know, I got so many things to do, I'm running this business and why haven't you collected the oil? And for all you know, you're the 3rd person they called, the other people didn't answer the phone and they got 2 other people that they can call the moment you slip. Like, I feel like that first couple of collections is really critical. So I try to, you know, ask as many questions as possible. At the same time, they're often busy when they call you to sign up for service. They're talking to people in the background. So you don't always get to ask them those questions, but I really try.
And when you create your route, you can set it for any length of time, 10 days, 5 days. Next we'll go to reporting. So the Biodiesel Control Center creates this various reports to help you kind of monitor your business and what's going on. So you can look at the what's happening by individual route. So for Route 1, you can kind of, let's see, well, that's not really what I want.
The month is a cool one because this is the one I use all the time. Do July because that's the last full month.
Okay.
So you can sort by the column headers here when the report comes out. I mean, scroll to the very bottom.
is everything picked up in July?
So it tells you how much you collected that month, but if you sort by the different things, like you can sort, one of my tasks as the owner is every time a report is run, every time a route is run, to be notified, which really doesn't happen. It's something that's an area for improvement for us. If I'm notified every time a route is run, I can come and look at the report, and I can look at that, I can sort by the needs follow-up column and say, okay, I gotta call Austin Daily Press. Let's see, why does it say, it says empty. So why don't you click on Austin Daily Press?
Oh, is it the downtown one?
And so it says it needs follow-up, and it was empty. So then go down to the bottom right and go to the pickup history, and I say, well, it's the first time it was ever picked up. That one probably was flagged erroneously, but most of the time it's more like our container was empty and our lid was on the floor or something on the ground. So then you go back here and you go to the history and you say, 0, 20, 150, 0, for history, and you say, okay, this one has theft, this is a problem, I need to address this. Then you got to come up with a plan and say, look, what's the most gallons I've ever collected? 150 after 8 weeks. They probably need a 200-gallon container that's lockable, not 2 55-gallon drums.
Right, or you might note that there are 2 Austin Daily Presses, and that other one was a trailer which we've never serviced. So it's kind of like you went to the wrong location that time, and here's the actual location. So, go back to reporting. You can kind of keep track of your largest producers, look at your top producers, and see if the numbers are switching around, or if there's kind of a group or a restaurant emerging in the list that you aren't really identifying as a really great customer, but they really are.
And it starts out being sorted by gallons of oil ever produced, ever collected. And then you can see it's got the average there too. So it's interesting that our top producer, I know.
What are they doing?
That is the very first customer we ever got. That company is why we started our business, actually. I don't even know if you know this story. There was a company who wanted to do used cooking oil in their moving trucks, and they called me and said, we're getting the oil from Bio, and we could use some help filtering it. And so that whole thing was like, whoa, okay. We've been talking about maybe starting some business. So we started our business to service office furniture now, 3 big trucks, and we sold them a grease tank and a biodiesel tank. Went to the SPIO and got them to sign up with us as a contract and convinced Office Furniture now to let us handle everything. And look at that, times $3, you could probably make $30,000, $40,000 from that one account.
This is the last thing I wanted to mention is just the pricing structure, which if you have less than 100 accounts, we charge $50 a month. If you have less than 1,000, it's $100 a month. And over 1,000 is $150 a month. So it's a magnitude lower than a lot of other softwares that we've been presented with.
What's the startup fee?
$150, and it goes to a third party that sets it up. And just to be real clear, I said it before, we're not a software company, we're a biodiesel company. I spent about $12,000 on this, like hiring the intern that turned into a manager that spent most of his time working on this. We have a handful of paying customers. We don't advertise it, we don't market it. It is how we run our business all day, every day. This is it. It may have a bug here or there, but there's nothing major. It doesn't crash. It's hosted on a tier 1 internet server through Rackspace. Any downtime we've had has been less than probably 30 minutes or so while they're rebooting their virtual servers or whatever. It just works, and so we're happy to share that cost that helps us cover our cost and helps go to maintain it as little things come up.
It doesn't include payment history, what you're paying for oil.
That's a good point. It does not. It has nothing to do with commissions. However, all of the data is there, and what that means is it would be fairly easy for to add that kind of module in there. But because we don't pay, we have kind of a complicated royalty thing that we did with our last employee, and I didn't feel like it was worth building all that in here because it was too
Well,
custom
what
for
about
us.
just payment to the customer?
Sorry, good point. Yeah.
I mean, both would be interesting in terms of payment to your salesman, payment
Both, yeah.
to the customer.
It
for
would
the
be
oil.
pretty easy to produce a report that's a commission report that shows, how do you want to do it? You want to do it by Patricia, and then it finds everyone that Patricia got, you can show her. Or if you want to show, you know, your entire list of customers, put check boxes next to them or whatever. It